Um, so yeah, so burrowing owls are synonymous with grasslands. So we've been running this program for a while. So this is just sort of a recap of our program and sort of where we fit in with burrowing owls in Canada. So this is typically sort of the range of grasslands within Canada. And this would have been our range of burrowing owls. So you can see the historical range was a lot larger. In BC, it wasn't a huge range, as you can see, but I actually think it was probably a little bit bigger than that, but probably not accurately cited. And it has definitely decreased quite a bit. You can see down here, this is really where we only find wild burrowing owls. And actually, since this is 2004, it's actually probably even less than that now. So burrowing owls are listed federally. And so this is the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada. So the common name is burrowing owl, scientific name Athene cunicularia. And the Western burrowing owl is actually hypugaea. So there's lots of different sort of subspecies of them. But the one we're focused on right now that's found in Canada and most of the United States is the Western burrowing owl. They are endangered in Canada. In the United States, they're threatened. So the range, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba. And every year they kind of keep getting reassessed and they're still on the endangered list. So reasons for this designation, of course, working with grasslands, probably you guys know, and the Grassland Council knows that grasslands are sort of a habitat that we are losing across North America. And so anything sort of associated with grasslands has also suffered some declines. The Canadian population has been down from about 90% from 1990 to 2000. So a huge jump there, and then a further 60%. Again, the remaining individuals, wild ones, are in Alberta and Saskatchewan. And again, just talking with people in Saskatchewan, there's probably less than 100 left in Saskatchewan, less than 200. So that's pretty down from thousands and thousands. British Columbia and Manitoba essentially are extirpated. So that means there aren't any populations left. So it's functionally extinct in those areas. And so BC and Manitoba do the captive breeding and release programs. So reasons for decline, like we said, loss of habitat, grassland habitat. Even though there is a bit more grassland still in the prairies, sort of the usable habitat has really diminished. And even though we still have a lot of this bunch grass, sagebrush still around, again, it's not usable and it's fairly in piecemeal. The big thing with burrowing owls, they don't actually dig their own burrows. So if people, I'm kind of not going too much into what a burrowing owl is because I'm assuming a lot of people know that already, but the only owl that actually lives underground. They can do some digging and remodeling, but they generally rely on other burrowing mammals. So BC would be primarily badgers, in the prairies, prairie dog towns. Reduction in prey population. So again, a lot of our grasslands have sort of broken up into a lot of agriculture and development, and that actually reduces the food that the owls would eat. So the owls typically eat a lot of rodents and insects. So again, all of these places using probably a lot of insecticides and pesticide use, and again, that huge jump of like burrowing owls declining again sort of matches with a lot of pesticide use and sort of this and hawks as well. Vehicle collisions. So even through the grasslands, we've got down in half. And of course, this year we really noticed it. We get like drought, fire, floods, all of those extreme weather conditions really impact the burrowing owls and impact all of us, right? So quickly, just the early years. So they were deemed extirpated from BC in the 1980s. There was a program to release some bred burrowing owls that were bred in Ontario. And the provincial government did a lot of work in sort of those early years. They unfortunately abandoned it because they said there's still lots in Alberta and Saskatchewan. So, but as we know right now, that's not necessarily not the case anymore. This is McIntosh in the early 1990s. He said, we've got some captive ones, let's start breeding them here. And so we've been releasing burrowing owls since 1992. Though that was only sort of 9 owls at the time. And primarily we work with a lot of ranchers. Those are the people that have been kind of the stewards as the last bit of sort of intact grasslands, as close to intact grasslands as possible. From about 2000, we became a formal society, perfected our artificial burrow design because we're lacking those burrowing mammals, so putting in artificial burrows. And we keep adding sites with other organizations. And we had 2 breeding facilities at the time. So one at the Kamloops Wildlife Park, so the BC Wildlife Park up in Kamloops, and then one near White Rock, actually. Now the one at White Rock is now at Port Kells, so that's in Langley. And 2005 to now, we use this technology called a soft release cage, which I'll explain a little bit later. And we release about 100 owls a year to BC. And we opened up a new facility in 2011 in the South Okanagan and Oliver. So between those 3 facilities, we're able to maintain genetic diversity and also protect the population. So if something happens to one facility, we've got the 2 others. So kind of don't put all your eggs in one basket thing. And also perfected DNA. So before we release the owls, we actually need to test them to see which ones are male and female. Burrowing owls look pretty much the same, and they tend to, like, males tend to be a little bit bigger than them, but it's so hard to tell. And during breeding season, the males will get a little bit lighter, but when they're young, we can't really tell. So we actually pluck feathers and send it to a lab. They tell us who's male or female. So this is what happens at our breeding facility every year. So in February, we actually have founders. So those are owls that originally came from Washington and Oregon, because remember, we had none left here in BC. And we pair them up in our facilities, and then they lay eggs in about April, and they incubate them for about 25 to 28 days. And then they have their young here in April, May. They're like little puff balls. They're only probably the size of like 2 of your thumbs, so about 7 grams. And in July, once they start flying around in their pens, we can actually put a green over black band on them. So I'll show you that a little bit later. And these owls, so the owls that we released this year, so in April, were born last year. So it's kind of we have to plan a year in advance. So any of the owls, so our owls that were born this year, they will be released next April. So we'll release all of the offspring as 1-year-olds, and we keep the founders still in the breeding facility. And that's sort of the life cycle. And then the owls that we release out in the field, they do the same sort of life cycle, just a little bit later. And again, our captive breeding facilities. So this is our one in Oliver, one in Port Kells, and one in Kamloops. The one in Kamloops is our largest one. And again, founding owls originate from Washington and Oregon. So those are sort of wild owls. And we do have a way of keeping track of their genetics. This is in a stud bookkeeper, so that we make sure we don't pair up brother and sister. Our release sites, like I said, is with a lot of private ranchers, and we primarily release in the Thompson-Nicola, so between Kamloops and Merritt, and down in the South Okanagan. So we do have a couple sites with the province. We have some sites with Nature Conservancy of Canada, the BC Nature Trust, the Nature Trust of BC. Also, we're really proud to be working with the Upper Nicola Band and the Penticton Indian Band, and they have a lot of their own members doing the monitoring. And we're hoping eventually to have a federal site in the South Okanagan. We're hoping for the national park, and that's in the works. So, and a lot of our sites are already currently on the proposed site. So we're hoping that we can still be on there. So again, we talked about burrow installation. So unfortunately, not a lot of badgers. Badgers are also endangered in BC. So we've kind of had to do artificial burrows. And this is a technique used across North America for burrowing owl habitat improvement. And so it's a 3-bucket system. This is sort of their nest chamber down here. There's a tunnel that goes up. And so this is where the owls access it. The tunnel is about 10 feet long, and the bucket system is about dug between 3 to 4 feet down. This is a little bucket that fits on top, and this is where we can access so we can see what the owls are doing in there. And this works perfectly. The owls love it. They go in there. They have their young, no problem in there. The only thing is it is a lot of hard work to take these burrows, but once they're in, they're in. We do have to do maintenance every year, so checking to make sure they're free and clear so the owls can get in there. We haven't been able to do any sort of burrow installations the last couple of years because of COVID, but generally around this time in October is generally when we put in the burrows. So if you're looking for a fun volunteer outing, I'm hoping we can do one next year. So you can get in touch with me to help with that. Release techniques were developed by Amy Mitchell down here. So before she came along, we would just put the owls in the artificial burrows, put them together as male and female, and hope that they have young. Unfortunately, you know, they're coming from captive setting and they don't really know the hazards around, and they don't really know their partner yet. And so sometimes they get preyed upon or they leave. So the soft release system is just this little cage that you can see pops over the tunnel entrance. We put male and female in there, and we actually keep them in for a couple of weeks, or at least until they start building a nest or laying eggs, and then we'll take that off. And because if they've laid eggs, they're more apt to stay there and be more defensive. And while they're in that cage as well, we are still feeding them. So as you can see, this is soft release cages and no cages. So as soon as we added cages, there was actually a 50% increase in survivability of the owls we released, and an increase almost 50% in how many young were born. Unfortunately, the last couple of years haven't been great. And then you can see in 2020, due to COVID, we actually didn't put out the cages. We were unsure at that time if COVID would transfer to the owls. So we just didn't want to do too much handling and stuff. So this is a typical owl release. So everybody's like, I want to come and see the owls be released, but this is, here you can see one. So you can see it's not, we don't throw them up in the air, we just stuff them into a tunnel. So it's not a huge thing there. So again, for supplemental feeding, we feed primarily mice, and then we also feed day-old chicks, and that is good for their diet. That's what we feed them in the facilities. What they eat in the wild is a little different. A lot of pocket gophers, deer mice, down in other areas, maybe some kangaroo rats and things like that. So any sort of rodents. They'll also eat small birds, tons of insects, amphibians, reptiles. So basically anything about their size or smaller. This is generally a male food cache, so he'll do that he'll get a whole bunch of things, and that will entice a female. So the owls that we do release, we do supplement feed them throughout the season, just to give them that boost, so that the young that they have, those are really the ones that we hope will be true wild owls and will survive and come back. Now, how to keep track of them, we put on 2 different bands. So we put on this US Fish and Wildlife band that's on a big database throughout North America. So anywhere this number is found, it gets back to us. This is our local BC band. So everywhere has different colors and alphanumeric numbers. So ours is green over black. So even if it's found somewhere else, that one's a little bit easier to see with a scope. We weigh them all. This is the Burrowing Owl burrito. So we actually take a little cloth, we fold them up, and that's the easiest way to weigh them. They weigh about probably the maximum 180 to 200 grams, but generally burrowing owls are about 150 to 160 grams. So you don't need a big scale there. This is actually a little jewelry scale. And then we take some other wing and leg measurements as well. So something with everything that we've done, I think if the owls stayed here all winter, we probably would have a successful population. The big hurdle right now for the owls is migration. So all owls in Alberta and the northern United States do migrate south in the winter. So, a big thing is trying to track them on these migrations. This is just general sightings since the mid 90s to now. This is just, somebody sees the green over black band, or maybe there's a dead one, or someone gets one in hand and is able to release them. So we kind of get a good picture that, they're kind of heading down this way to California. And we do know from other work that's been done in Alberta and Saskatchewan and in the States that they generally, all of them try to get down to Mexico for the winter and then head back up. One of the other ways that we can try and track them is a geolocator. Unfortunately, any of the ones that have been on Canadian owls haven't really worked out. This is the unit here. It only records light and dark cycles. So you can only can't pinpoint it as accurately. And then you need the unit back. So you need the owl to come back and you take off the unit. We put on 11, we didn't get any back. Alberta put on like 50, they got one back and the data was corrupted. So if they're going on these long journeys, it doesn't seem to work as well. They did put some on in Oregon, and they found that if the owls were going short distances, then they were able to get those units back. The best thing to get is a PTT, which is a platform terminal transmitter, and that's this little doohickey here. Unfortunately, it's like $5,000–6,000 per unit, and they need to be very tiny. So you can see the weight there, it's about 5 grams. Remember I said these guys are like 160 to 180 grams. So it needs to be less than 3% of their weight. It also has a little solar panel on the top, and that's what makes it so expensive. And that just makes it last, because really batteries are sort of the what really makes these units very weighty. But it's real-time GPS that you get. So even if you don't get the owl back, you still get the points. This is just an example of one that was a couple that were done in the States and one up in Alberta. And you could see like they kind of go wherever, but eventually do sort of end up in Mexico. Some of the ones in California just do short distances. And they don't all go in flocks. They all go on their own and find their own way down south. So that makes it also complicated, is really learning how the burrowing owls are getting down there and where are they stopping. And a lot of issues that we find in Canada with loss of habitat is also happening in the States. And so we're wondering if some of the stopover points that they were using have changed or shifted because of development. And we also are working more with people in Mexico, but that is can be difficult as well. So lots of barriers there. And we've only put on one transmitter. And so we released this owl here and actually just went across the border, like south of Abbotsford, and then came back. So again, those are sort of weird things too. And as climate changes, that could also throw another kink in there. So since the program started in the early 90s, you can see we didn't release a lot, and so obviously didn't have a lot born. But we continued to kind of release quite a few. This sort of dipped down just because we had some founders that were retiring and we needed to replace. And you can see we have quite a high amount of wild born. We had a really tough year with floods and then fires back in 2017, and that was actually bad across the board. And then this is how many returns we've got. So actually 2015 was probably the best year. And again, that was a really good year across North America again. And that probably has to do with climate. We had about 50 or 60 owls return, which was spectacular. And then it sort of dropped from there. We're hoping that it'll kind of come back up and maybe possibly do a bit of a cyclical thing there. The main thing though with burrowing owls, even if we cannot bring them back, if we stop doing this program, there definitely won't be any burrowing owls back, and they keep declining. Alberta, Saskatchewan. A lot of our research and our development into releasing owls and all that kind of good stuff has actually gone to help programs across Canada. And we work collectively with them and also down in the States to help preserve some of those populations. We also have a great community in the Okanagan and in BC helping with the burrowing owls, work with lots of different partners. And at all of our facilities, they're basically managed by the volunteers. So we have volunteers every day coming and feeding and cleaning the owls, which is great. Normally, I have my education owl with me but of COVID, of course, we haven't really done that. So I thought you'd like to see a little video. This is Pluto, one of our education owls. So he comes with me to different schools and events, and then people can see what a burrowing owl actually looks like. And here he is coming out of his little burrow at our facility. He'll come out a little bit more here. He's quite puffed up. Every time he sees me, he like really puffs up. So people always like, he looks really big, but he just puffs up his feathers. Yes. And just want to say thank you. And thank you to the Grassland Council for inviting us. And definitely thank you to all the volunteers, ranchers, and other landowners. If you're interested and you like Burrowing Owl wine, please go visit Burrowing Owl Winery. All of their tasting fees come directly to our program and actually helps with the owls. The winery actually started around the same time as our society in the early 90s. So we've been working with them closely for a long time. And check out our website, burrowingowlbc.org. You can donate through there. We also have a Facebook and an Instagram page. We don't throw up a lot of their stuff on there, but we do have some more current information. And if you do want to volunteer or ask any questions, just go to our website. There is an email address, and eventually we don't respond right away, but within a week, we will respond to you. So